Thank you. I'm Natalie Browning, and I'm a research services librarian at Longwood University. And we got a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services from the American Rescue Plan. So our grant is titled Wellbeing in the Heart of Campus, Community Connections at Greenwood Library. And one of our community connections is the Moden Museum. So the purpose of our grant is to kind of get people more comfortable coming back to in-person gatherings after COVID lockdowns. And speaking of lockdowns, we thought that there was an interesting parallel between COVID lockdowns and the school closings in Prince Edward County. So that's why we're here tonight. I don't know if I mentioned that the grant from the library is also a partnership with Longwood CAPS. So one of my panel co-moderators.
Louder, just louder. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Maureen Halls-McKay. I'm Maureen, and I serve as the Director of CAPS, which is Counseling and Psychological Services at Longwood, and also as the Dean of Wellbeing. And I was really thrilled when Natalie reached out to me to assist with the grant. CAPS is always happy to collaborate with our friends over in the library, and this has been a great partnership. So thank you, Natalie. And I think we're going to have Kanan introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Townsend, and I serve as the Managing Director here at the Moden Museum, and very much was thrilled to be a part of this grant and the process of hosting this program, especially with regards to community relations, and of course, the obvious part of the title, of course, connections to the Prince Edward County school closings that we're going to be talking about and touching on here today. We know the past 18 months, 2 years, has been obviously a very tumultuous time for everybody involved, but we're very, very interested in exploring kind of some of those parallels, right? Apples and oranges, right? What we want that title too, but learning from the past, right? Learning from people in our very own community, and seeing, in both contexts, how important well-being is with regards to kind of moving forward in times of educational strife. So out of curiosity, are there people here, so just kind of about show of hands, are there folks here who are current educators or working in adjacent to the school systems? Well, folks, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Any folks with children potentially in the school systems and around the schools? Okay, so a good 5-6 people, right? So a good half or so of the audience have, or have some kind of vested interest in this topic, right? So the virtual people out on Facebook and YouTube certainly will be interested in this as well, but this is something relevant to almost everybody here in this room and everybody in this room in some capacity. So we look forward to kind of diving into some of these topics here this evening.
So again, before we get further into our conversation, we'll have our panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start with our in-person panelists we have here.
Yeah, this works. This is good, right? Hey, great evening, everyone. My name is Louis Seagood III. I am a teacher at Prince Edward Middle School, and I'm also the president and founder of the youth organization Fresh Boys Club. And thank you, Kanan, for inviting me. Like I said, I've been in the school system going on 4 years now, and I've been a mentor around here, Prince Edward County. So I know the effects of the school closings and of COVID. So, yeah.
Can you introduce yourself, Kelly?
Hi, I'm Kelly Acevedo. I'm a school psychologist. I currently work in Buckingham County, but I previously worked in Prince Edward, and my daughter will be starting at preschool at Prince Edward in a few weeks.
And thank you for everyone bearing with us as we deal with technology, speaking of times of COVID. So thank you.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. So I was asked to start our discussion this evening with sharing some facts and some statistics. And I just want to say that they're not great, in terms of mental health during COVID. And I don't think that's going to surprise any of us. When we think about what our world has been through, and even what COVID has led to, it's no surprise that the statistics regarding well-being and mental health are fairly grim. So I just want to put that caveat out there. I'm not used to sharing such gloom and doom. But then we are going to talk about some hopeful lessons. But certainly, no surprise, concerns about mental health and substance use have grown during the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting economic recession. Again, no surprise there. It's also, again, no surprise that the pandemic has created new barriers for people who wish to access mental health resources. So surveys show that there's been a major increase in the number of people in the United States who report symptoms of anxiety, stress, depression, and sleep disturbance when they think about their lives now versus their lives pre-pandemic. There was a survey done around the mid-2020, so the pandemic was fairly new to us. And at that time, and since that time, 4 in 10 adults in the United States report symptoms of either anxiety and or depression. And we compare that to pre-pandemic numbers, it was 1 in 10. So 1 in 10 jumped to 4 in 10. And then with that, some people, mostly as a coping mechanism, have also increased the use of substances, whether it be alcohol or other drugs. And again, a lot of times people will use a substance to hopefully alleviate some of the anxiety and the depression and the sleep disturbance. But of course, as we know, clinically and just anecdotally, the use of substances really has the reverse effect. It tends to increase problems with sleep. It tends to increase symptoms of depression. Alcohol is a depressant, and it tends to increase symptoms of anxiety. So you have kind of a double whammy here happening really nationwide and among most all age groups as well. So 13% of adults reported new or increased use of substances due to pandemic-related stress. And then just to kind of talk about another issue of suicide, 11% of adults reported thoughts of suicide. Now, when we think specifically about parents and children, again, the statistics are not good or not promising, I guess. Of course, to help the spread of COVID, the schools, the majority of schools and childcare facilities closed, and then, of course, pivoted to virtual instruction, at least for some time. And with that change, of course, children didn't have the same access to support and resources. This made me think back to when I was in grade school and high school and junior high. And really, school was my refuge. You know, I love school. And it was the place where I got mentoring. It's the place where I got support with my friends and my teachers. So without that, you know, a lot of students felt very lost. And their parents, you know, I'm sure some parents here can relate to this, that when the schools closed, parents had to juggle so much more, you know, kind of employment along with childcare, they're, you know, seeing their own children through their school, their virtual schooling at home. So it was just added stress upon added stress, in addition to the stress of this pandemic that was, of course, killing many, many people. So just so much on the minds and hearts of so many. And then lack of childcare options. You know, a lot of childcare facilities had to close, at least temporarily, again, adding to the burden, both the financial burden and just the practical burden. So when they ask, the majority of parents now are more concerned about their children's mental health and well-being than they were pre-pandemic. Now, Kate and I were talking before we got started that really some children, and Lewis might speak to this, some children really thrived during the pandemic, academically and emotionally. So it's not all gloom and doom. There are some children and some adults who did just fine during the pandemic. But you think about the disruption in the routine, the daily routine. You think about the loss of social contact. You think about the added stress of being home all the time. You know, when, you know, even in the best of home situations, that's just a lot of alone time together with your family. And then when you add kind of some family chaos or family dysfunction on top of that, of course, it just increases concern. So both parents and children have experienced increased mental health concerns since the pandemic, and especially women. Women more than men with children report increased mental health concerns. And one research study that I read, the women in the workplace during the height of the pandemic, 1 in 4 women considered either leaving their jobs or they left their jobs, or they drastically reduced their hours. Again, leading to more financial strain on them and their family. Now, when we look at young adults, so if you think about the age group that I tend to work with at Longwood, the 18 to 24 or so, again, increased mental health concerns. And clinically, we definitely see this within our student population at Longwood. Increased anxiety especially, and kind of a resurgence of depressive symptoms. Pre-pandemic, well, when I started Longwood in the late 90s, depression was really the number one presenting concern. And then probably in the early 2000s, it switched to anxiety. It has held steady, anxiety being the predominant concern. Now we're seeing a real resurgence of depression among the college population. And then add to that, much like the adult population, the substance use. And as we see more serious drug use, just really lethal drug use. So overdoses, death by overdoses have increased, especially during lockdown. That was a real concern. And then, of course, as we all know, the pandemic disproportionately affected the health of communities of color, in terms of higher rates of infection, higher rates of death. In addition, COVID-19 exacerbated the inequalities in healthcare for BIPOC communities. So in terms of seeking mental health, there was a pre-existing maybe hesitancy or barriers, but those became even more heightened during the pandemic. So non-Hispanic Black adults, 48%, and Hispanic or Latino adults, 46%, are more likely to report symptoms of anxiety and or depression when compared to non-Hispanic white adults at 41%. So again, those are just some statistics that I kind of give us as we frame this discussion, and they're kind of sobering. And that's why we're having programs such as this that are focused on well-being, because coming together and connecting with each other, listening to each other, learning from each other, I think that all ties into our own well-being. I know connecting with others is such a value of mine. So I value these kinds of programs where I can see Shirley Blackwood and say hi and give her a hug. And I just, I think for my own well-being, this is also important. So we asked Lewis and Kelly to be here with us tonight. We're so grateful. And we do have some questions that we're going to start with. So speaking of well-being, Kelly and Lewis, what is well-being to you? And then when you think about your students, the students that you work with, what is well-being to them?
You can go, Kelly. You can go first.
Mm-hmm. So I meet with a lot of students. I work across K-12, and I talk with parents a lot too. And the way that I really like to think about well-being, especially as it relates to mental health, is kind of that cheesy live, laugh, love, right? And how is how you're feeling right now impacting that? So is it impacting your ability to do your daily things, to live your life? Is it affecting your ability to have relationships with others and love? And is it impacting your ability to enjoy what's going on around you and laugh, right? And so for me, well-being is kind of just that base level of being able to live, laugh, love, right? So you may not be 100% all the time, everything's great, love and everything, but you do still have kind of that ability in there to do those things. And really that kind of translates into physical health too, thinking about how, if you're really sick, you're not able to do those things.
Well-being to me definitely deals with health, mental health, physical health. As a mentor, one of our jobs is to make sure that our students, our kids, are in the best mindset. And that's first thing in the morning. When they first come in the morning, it's the first thing you do. Good welcome, good welcome. Hey guys, how you doing? And one thing I like to do in my class on Mondays, we always ask, how's everybody weekends? Just to touch base. And then we also do a daily check-in first thing in the morning for them, so I can see, if somebody is feeling down, I can address the situation before it, carries on throughout the day. But definitely well-being starts as a teacher, like I said, first thing in the morning. And then it continues. It goes on all day because, like I said, some kids, their outlet to peace is school. So while they're in school, our job is not only to teach them, but our job is to make them feel like they're in a safe environment. So that's, like I said, my main thing in the morning is to make sure that I talk to each of my kids and, get a smile. If I don't get a smile, check in on them, So, that's my meaning of well-being is making sure that our kids, are able to crack a smile, are able to feel safe and able to be comfortable to, like she said, do your daily activities, do your work, think, process things. So yeah, that's what well-being is to me.
I love both. I love the live, love, and laugh. And I love what you're saying, Lewis. And I'm guilty because I know better. Here I am, a psychologist, a dean of well-being, and Gus can probably attest to this because when I have a meeting with somebody, and Renee, you can attest to this too, I have an agenda and it's like, here we go. Let's okay. And I don't even say, Gus, how are you today?
Yeah.
So I love that
Yeah.
you make that a daily
Absolutely.
practice with your students. And I think back to teachers and mentors I had, that is something I need to improve on for sure. Set the agenda aside for just a moment,
Just a
Maureen.
moment.
Yes.
So as we're talking about supporting both our own well-being and the well-being of our students and students that we mentor, how do you feel, to our panelists, about the statistics that Maureen shared? And has that been your experience? Like, has the kind of sobering, kind of doom and gloom, as she put it, been your experience in dealing with that?
I'm gonna take this one, Kelly, since you went first last time. I want to address the single mothers aspect of what you said. Like I said, being a mentor, a lot of our young men come from single mothers. So when the schools did close because of COVID, like you said, a lot of mothers who are full-time, some mothers got full-times and part-times, had to decide on childcare. And like I said, some of them have 3 or 4 kids, young kids. So, and they can't just up and leave their job, like you said, that's a financial burden. So they couldn't do that. So they had to make sacrifices, which led to a 12-year-old watching 5, 6, and 3-year-olds, right? So I think in certain cases, that was, like I say, a very damaging thing. You had a 11-year-old who was not ready to, be on their own and take care of anybody. They barely can take care of themselves, having to now have to take care of 2 or 3 kids by themselves because their mom has to work. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I think that was a very, like I said, a very challenging thing during that time. And I know, like I said, as a mentor, I've had a few kids who experienced that, as a mentor and, dealing with a situation you can't, I mean, in a dream world, you want to be a superhero and save them, right? But I mean, what you do as a mentor when you can't actually, do, anything about it, you just give them positive energy, positive advice, and how to handle situations. So that single mother one hit because, like I said, a lot of our mentees are single mothers and they have, multiple kids and they couldn't just leave their job because of, the crisis. So they had to adapt to it. And most kids were able to adapt, but a lot of kids weren't able to adapt. And, the damage was done in that instance. The single mothers thing it hit me because, like I said, a lot of my mentees have single mothers. So yeah, that was.
Yeah, I was lucky in that most of my work could be done virtually. So I joke that my daughter is an honorary school psychologist because she sat in I don't know how many Zoom meetings, especially this summer that we closed, and she couldn't go to anywhere when we were like fully quarantined, closed down. She was in a lot of meetings with me. I think the statistics overall weren't surprising. what we've seen in schools really is we used to have, most of our students, maybe every once in a while, would have some anxiety or some depression or some kind of lower level struggle that maybe one conversation could help, or just having that check-in from a teacher was enough. And I think this year and last year, what we were seeing really is those were just kind of multiplied. But when everyone is at 10%, 20% greater need, that's when you see those statistics that Maureen was sharing.
Thank you to both Lewis and Kelly. The next question is, as we sit in this important space here at Moton, can you tell us about when you first learned about, and maybe how you learned about the Prince Edward County school closings?
Go ahead, Kelly.
So I learned when I walked into the Moton Museum. So I actually grew up in St. Louis, did college out there, everything. Moved to Farmville, and someone was like, you need to go check out the Moton Museum. And I did, and was just blown away. So basically right where you guys are right now is when I learned about the school closings. And it was just crazy to me that I could have 2 different post-grad degrees and not know, like, in education, and have no one ever even have said anything about that whole thing to me. I would have loved to have worked with my students in St. Louis and shared the story of students walking out on their own and the fight that went on in Prince Edward. I think it's so empowering and impactful. And I just would love students everywhere to hear about it. And it's kind of my opening thing when someone's like, oh, you live in Farmville? I'm like, yeah. And when you come, you need to go to the Moton Museum.
Crazy. I'm born and raised in Prince Edward County, and I did not find out about the Moton and things, the school closings, not until I think it was my junior year of high school. Yeah, junior year of high school. It was not taught to us in elementary, middle, and I'm not downing anybody when I'm saying it. I'm just being honest. It wasn't until my junior year, I want to say junior going into senior year, when I found out about it. And it was crazy because I was like, huh? Like, we're the Prince Edward, the only school like to close for 5 years. Like, it was kind of crazy that we haven't learned about it, since then. And ever since I found out about it, even when I came to Longwood, like, I wanted to know more, like, in depth about it. And it's just crazy. And as a history teacher now, I stress it. Like, I stress it, man, because, it's important. School closing is very important. I have a lot of family members who were basically affected by it. So it's a very important thing to me. It's when, I take it very seriously because, we had like 5 years, one of our counselors was affected by it, so I take it very seriously because, it could happen to us. And, I tell my kids all the time, do not take your education lightly. Because, right now you don't have to fight for your education. Your education is right there. So, I always tell my kids when they don't want to do work, stuff like that. I'm like, look, let me tell you, man, you take advantage of your opportunities. But yeah, I was into junior year of high school, but ever since then I've been on it. Like, I've been on it. Like, I've been wanting to know more. I've been wanting to know, the different cases, different things. And like I said, it's very interesting. If you ever have some time to get deep in depth into it, it's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's another reason why we wanted to come to the Moton as part of the grant, is because it's important to, as part of a community's well-being, to kind of deal with the past and learn from it and go from there. So the next question is kind of flipping around a little bit. So kind of in parallel to that, what did you feel when Virginia announced the COVID lockdowns, especially for schools?
So this was my first year of teaching when this happened, right?
Oh, wow.
So when they announced, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, when they, was it March 16th? Yes, March 16th. When, I remember the date. When they announced it, it was a relief because I was burnt out because I'm like, oh, when they first announced, I'm like, yes, I needed a break, man. First, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm thinking a couple weeks, you know, like I said, it was my first year and I was burnt out. I ain't gonna lie, I was burnt out. But that was, like I said, that was my first general reaction. But after the fact, after we found out, I think it was like, what, 3 weeks, couple weeks later where it was gonna be permanent. You know, my feelings slowly was like, okay, yeah, thank God, man, I get a little break. But then, you know, when it kept going and going, it started to, you know, you started to think about your kids eventually, you know, like, you know, when school let out, everybody had the signs, you know, get out, you know, good. But it comes back, you know, no matter what an educator said, they that moment, they want that break. But eventually you miss your kids, man. You miss interacting, you miss socially, seeing that they're okay, you know, being able to see their faces. So yeah, my initial reaction was thank God. But after it kept going though, you know, you start with your kids, man. You want the kids back. You want them to be back normal. So yeah. So.
I'm just going to interrupt. I wonder if you could speculate. Do you think that teachers, when the school closing happened in Prince Edward, do you think they had that moment of, oh, we get a break? Or can you speculate how it might have been same?
Well, difference because the school closings that happened back then was more racial. You know, it was more, this is not happening. So you guys will have to go so no, the two instances were to me, my opinion. And once again, I think it wasn't, it was more racially, to those school closings. This was more like, you know, health wise of the kids, you know, life or death.
Yes.
You know, so that's my, you know, point on it. Yeah, two differences.
So I don't remember the date, but I do remember as we were getting ready to leave, I guess we had like a half day or something, or I was just later or something. I remember being in my office, like live streaming the governor's thing, and then grabbing like all of my stuff. I have so many different kits and tools and things that I use with different students at different times that I just loaded up with everything. And my husband was a teacher in the school at that time. And he was like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't think we're coming back for a while. I need to have these supplies and I don't know when I'm going to get back in my office. And so I just had, I don't know, probably like 20 or 30 pounds of just stuff that I carried out to the car and brought home because I just kind of had this gut feeling that we were going to be gone for a while.
All right, so we're gonna go towards the end because we want to get some audience participation. I'll check the chat to see if there might be any questions that folks might have in the chat. But kind of last one's a bit of a two-parter. So I'm going to start with, you know, so we grapple a lot with the title just because there's an inherent sensitivity. We're talking about this pandemic and school closure, of course. You know, both were very and are very dramatic in a lot of ways, and so we didn't want to conflate the two instances. Instead, we picked apples and oranges quite literally because it's like comparing apples and oranges, right? Both fruit, maybe, sure, but very, very different, right? Sweet, savory, salty, tart, whatever. So we wanted to pick something that really could show a comparison, but not, show different improvement, similar, not improving. And so for us, when we're talking about it and figuring out the title, there was a lot, of course, that went into that background. And so for me, and I'll start kind of with an example, and Louis, you kind of brought this kind of to my brain when you talked about, like, you were excited, right, when they were like, yeah, we're not coming back, right? And so that made me think a lot about a parallel, right, going back when the schools closed in 59, the kids were extremely excited, right, because this had never happened before, right? Closing the schools have been shut down in other places by the state, segregated white schools only for 8 months to a year, right? That had happened in other places, but that had lost, that had failed in the courts. And so what happened here in Prince Edward County next was unprecedented. And so, June 2nd, 1959, they decided, okay, we need to fund that public education system. And so the kids, for the most part, went back to what they were doing before. They were hanging out, they were having fun-ish times. But then, September rolls around, schools don't open. November rolls around, schools don't open. January rolls around, schools don't open. So there's like, okay, well, this is not fun anymore, right? So I got a lot of the similar kind of feeling,
Correct.
right? Different contexts, of course, but it's like, wow. And so that made me think of something else too. Working with our magazine project, I see some of you all have already picked that up, which is wonderful. But if you haven't picked it up, shameless plug, you can grab it on your way out the door. But as part of our project, we work with and tell stories of those who were locked out of school. And I think back, not just the most recent cycle, but the cycle before that, and we had Dolores Hendricks, who was one of our local volunteers, talking about the radio. And so let me put you in my shoes for a brief second. When February 29th, 2020 was the Moton Community Banquet. So long ago, the last event before lockdown for me, really. And then we went up to North Virginia, our local staff for a conference, the Virginia Association Museum Conference, to Nova, where the only reported case of COVID was at that time. And we're just like, we're going to be all right. It'll be fine. And so then when we get back from BAM, everything really shuts down. And so I remember from that point on, every single day at noon in the office, governor press conference, what's happening? Governor's press conference, what's happening? Governor's press conference, what is happening? Right? Having no idea what's going on. So fast forward a bit to this magazine project, right? And Minister Hendricks talking to us about, when the schools closed, again, unprecedented, right? This has never happened. Nobody had any idea that the schools would be closed eventually for 5 years at that point in time. And so she tells a story about every summer, her and her siblings, her friends, her family would sit by the radio and listen and wait and hope that they're going to say that the schools are going to be reopening in the fall. But one summer goes by, doesn't reopen. 2 summers go by, doesn't reopen. 3 summers goes by, doesn't reopen. Right? So I couldn't help but make those parallels and try to feel some sense of empathy towards what she had felt, even though it's very, very, very different. But that's kind of some of the parallel that I kind of draw between COVID pandemic and even the school closures. Closing for very different reasons, obviously, but certainly I was like, wow, I feel an ounce of maybe what you felt, because that anxiety, right, that you're wading into unknown water, you have no idea what's going to happen, how long schools are going to be closed for. But when the schools did close for the pandemic reason, went virtual, we really tried to make a point as a museum to say, look, we have living examples of education continuing, right? At kitchen tables, in church basements, and family dining room tables and such, right? Like, it does continue, right? So we use them as our example to persist forward. So all of my talking, to get to an actual question, and Lewis and Kelly, would you care to think of some examples, to tell us some examples that you think what some parallels might be between the Prince Edward County school closings and the kind of COVID shutdowns, and maybe some differences that you might observe, notice, et cetera, et cetera? And just give me a heads up who's going first, so I can get sure.
I can go. I'm good? Okay. Like Kenan said, both the different reasons for closing, but to me, a parallel is that it stopped everything. It stopped people's lives. People had to learn how to adapt with the new norm. People had to learn how to, like Kenan said, access education differently. You had virtual for us, and then, like Kenan said, you had kitchen tables or wherever else they could get their education from. But to me, both parallels that it stopped society, made society have to change and adapt, and had people waiting for when school was going to open. Because both instances, we didn't know when school was going to open. School could have probably still be closed now. We don't know. So I think that's the parallel. The difference is, like I say, going to I think all counties, I think Kelly can vouch for Buckingham too. We all went virtual. We had computers. We gave kids computers. During that time, when the school closed, they didn't issue computers. They didn't issue education material. They had to go find it on their own. So I think that was the major difference. We actually were able to dish out a lot of educational materials to kids, even for the kids that did not have internet. We did packets. So I think that's think major difference was Prince Edward County didn't. I don't think didn't push out the materials to society. I think because that's why individuals had to go and find ways. Some moved and some stayed and made things happen. But I think that's one of the major differences to me is that we as counties pushed education materials out there without them having to go find them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point on the differences is that schools, when they closed this time, were really trying the best that they could to make sure that students were still receiving an education. Another similarity that I saw was students enrolling in other schools. A lot of the private schools in the area either didn't shut down or didn't shut down for as long or just provided more in-person opportunities. And so people that had the ability to go to a private school received a different type of education than students that were not able to. And so that's definitely something we saw during the previous school closures, where students enrolling in those private schools or going to other places in order to get their education. And it was one of the first things I thought about really when they announced that schools were closing. I was like, well, Prince Edward's been through this. So we've already got some lessons learned about what not to do, right?
Well, Kelly, you just brought up lessons learned. So I wonder if each of you could talk about some of the hopeful lessons from both situations.
Like on the Prince Edward side, like she said, as a county, we've experienced being out of school before. So like she said, like Kelly said, that we, as a county knew how to approach it differently, and like you said, that was kind of the first thing me as well. When I found out it was going to be for a longer period of time, I was like, oh gosh, this is not good. So, as educators, we made that extra effort to make sure that our kids was able to get education daily, even if it was like on the phone, speakerphone. We made that attempt, and then as students, like I stress to my students, that one of the things that I hope lessons they learn is that education, when you have the chance to obtain education in the classroom, and take advantage of it. Like I go back to my kids, I always don't want to do work. Mr. G, why do I do all this work? Yeah, I'm like, look, guys, all of this stuff, I've been through it. All of this stuff, yes, it might seem boring, but you're going to appreciate it when you get older, because like I said, going back, it was a time ago where this was not easily obtainable, so you easily can obtain this now. So take advantage of your opportunities. And as like I said, as a whole community, man, I just hope that we learn that we need to, no matter what is going on, is make sure that, our kids are being educated and, and try to have a type of plan if something like this ever happens. Because like I said, it hit everybody out the blue both times. So like it's something to think about, basically, to have like that plan, to say, what if, I hate to say it, but you need to have that what if something happens. So I think that was a lesson learned where, this happens, okay, we're going to do this. So I think those are some of the lessons I believe that we'll probably learn.
I think both situations really highlighted the importance of community involvement, with the recovery back then, after being shut down for so long, and having those community schools and coming in and having all of the different like health and dentists and whatever. And Kanan can probably elaborate on that much better than I can. But all of the supports that they put in for that year, once they knew that schools were going to reopen, trying to catch students up. And it's kind of been the same thing this year. And what I have seen in the most successful classrooms are the teachers that really took this as a reminder of how important, like Louis was talking about, how important those connections are, and checking in with their students, and just making sure well-being, like our original question, making sure that everyone has good well-being. If you're not well, then you can't learn. And so I think a lot of educators, this was kind of a reminder to them of how important that is.
I think that as a society, we're talking more about the systemic reasons for the inequalities. I think there's less focus on individual behavior and more focus, thankfully, on the systemic reasons. So I have to think that helps everybody's most people's well-being, that recognition of what is leading to the disparities in terms of race. So I just had that thought.
Yeah, I've said multiple times.
We're going to get ready to open it up, see if there's any. Sorry, can I go something else to the?
One of the phrases I've been famous for this year is that we can't blame the pandemic, that these issues were there before and the pandemic just put a magnifying glass on them.
Yes, definitely inclined to agree with that. Certainly put them into more focus. And I think a lot of the data that Marie shared at the beginning, certainly if you disaggregate that data even further, it definitely highlights a lot of gaps in coverage and who is being more disadvantaged by certain things than others. So we want to open up to see if any folks in the audience had any questions. We've done kind of our kind of core questions, but we want to see if anybody in the audience might have any questions. Yes, and if one of y'all will repeat the question in the mic.
Yes.
Maureen, you talked about and you mentioned statistics and data, the 4 and 10 and the 1 and 10. That's nationwide.
Yes. So Dr. Jess was asking about a statistic that I shared earlier about the 1 in 4 versus 1 in 10. That was based on adults in the United States.
So are there Prince Edward County health records from 1951 following that might show a rise in mental health issues or alcoholism or something that you could correlate to the school closing, like before and then after? I'm wondering if those even exist, or did they even keep those records?
Right. Really great question. I don't know the answer. Jess is asking, does Prince Edward County have records in terms of mental health concerns and substance use concerns from then and now that could be compared? I don't know. Oh, good.
Yeah. And we've got some other folks here, so Cam and Chuck here, so you're welcome to add as well. I don't think that the source of record keeping was of course, not as good as it is now. And then the other thing we got to consider too is that when the schools closed here in Prince Edward County, there was a mass exodus out of the county. So there was something like, if I remember correctly, 2 Black doctors before the schools closed. Of course, that's segregated, so Black individuals with Black doctors. And so one of the doctors, from what I read, left immediately. And the other had tried to stay, but due to child care issues, could only stay for a period of time before they also left. So now there's no doctors in Prince Edward County. So even if we had the ability to maintain those records, there just weren't the people to do it. And so that kind of also translates into things like immunizations, booster shots, right? And I think Nurse Nellie Coles is a great example of that. Who unfortunately passed probably back in like 2018 or so. She told stories of going out to kids' homes just to get booster shots because they got them in school traditionally. And so, because they didn't have school anymore, she took that upon herself to kind of give that service to the community. So unfortunately, we could probably speculate, but I don't think that we have anything that's much more than kind of qualitative or speculation, unfortunately. But it would be fascinating to see. But then you talk about just generally how mental health was treated back then versus now. So for that reason too, I don't think we have a lot of data from that time. Yeah. Any other questions?
Other questions?
I actually have 2 questions. No one else has questions. My first question, Louis, is for you, and it's personal, so if you don't want to answer, I would say.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you were burned out, and you were like, thank you,
Yeah.
there's a rest. For your own mental health and well-being and physical well-being, did COVID wind up helping you or hurting you by the end of the year?
Good question.
Or the following year?
Do you want to repeat?
Yeah.
So to summarize for our online viewers, Renee is asking in regards to Lewis's comment about being relieved at the COVID school closings. Did he ultimately think that the closings helped him?
I'm going to be honest. So the reason I was burnt out, it was my first year, and I didn't. I'm gonna be honest with you. As being a kid, right? You don't know how much work a teacher actually do. You just, you're a kid, right?
Mhm.
Teachers, let me tell you, teachers, and like I said, we got fellow teachers in the audience. Teachers, and especially a teacher that I am. I pour a lot into my kids, a lot. And first year I was actually over pouring, so but the cup was overflowing. So I learned. Yeah, I've definitely learned since then. But I'm gonna be honest. It helped me understand how to conserve my energy. It helped me. And then it helped me also to realize that the kids wasn't the ones. It was actually just me just overdoing everything. Like I say, you ask anybody that know me, I intend to, when I'm into something, I try to put my whole heart in it, and that's my goal. But I was actually going, I was, like I said, I was active. I'm an interactive teacher. So you probably hear me louder than kids because I've been in class like that. But yeah, I think it did teach me to preserve, know how to, give, and know how to keep for me. Like you say, our well-being is important too. The kids need 100%, Mr. G, not 45%, so yeah, so it did help. Yes, ma'am.
So this is a well-being question, and it's for anybody, but it kind of goes back to something Lewis said, talking about connecting with your people early in the morning to see how they're doing. I guess my question is, whether we're talking about students or colleagues or family members, neighbors, whoever, what does that connection look like? What does that intervention look like, and how do you make the assessment of how they're doing? And as a non-licensed clinical therapist, what should we do?
So working on my summary skills. The question is in reference to, checking in and making connections as part of well-being. So what does that look like? We have some very wordy audience members, so I'm trying to summarize succinctly. Yes.
I can remember a guest speaker at Longwood many years ago. I do not remember who it was. It was a man, and he came from a very chaotic family upbringing. And he shared a moment during his talk where he was somewhere and a woman, a stranger, made eye contact with him. I think he was sitting waiting for something to end or something. And that woman made eye contact with him. And he, as an adult, remembered the power of that woman looking at him in the eye, because that didn't happen in his daily life. So I think that, to me, just speaks to the power of a connection, between strangers. And I think oftentimes in our busy lives, we walk down the street and maybe we don't make eye contact or say hello. But I think I do remember, I wish I remember who it was, but I remember that story so clearly and how powerful that was.
I come from a genuine, loving family, and as a kid, that's how we were brought up, to be until somebody give you a reason not to be, genuinely, respect every individual. So, when I ask you, how you doing, I'm genuinely asking that, be genuinely, because like I said, I believe, like I said, life is short, man, and it's no need to be walking around frowning at everybody. Nobody, even when I'm having a bad day, you never know I'm having a bad day, because I'm not gonna preserve my bad energy or my bad day on you. You didn't do anything. So, just like I said, man, I think if more people, took that perspective, I think, of course, the world would be a much better place. But yeah, I mean, general connection, just, eye contact, generally asking how they do. You don't gotta get personal. Just, hey, how you doing today, man? You good? Hey, just genuine affection. Not, and because people can tell when it's fake. We can tell fake vibes. So you just be genuine, and that's what I be. I see somebody, I can be anybody, like you said, on the street, just, hey, how you doing,
And I think some of us, can sometimes shy away from that kind of connection because we fear if you say, how you doing? And somebody really tells you how they're doing and it's not, then you feel like, what am I supposed to do about it? But again, it goes back to what we were talking about before the program started, just really listening and validating their experience. It's not like we have to fix it, but to be seen and to be heard is just so powerful.
And I'm just to piggyback off that. If somebody actually, when you ask them when they ask you how you're doing and they actually express how they're doing, they're probably feeling comfortable because you made them feel, comfortable to tell you how they're really doing. Not for you, like you said, not to fix the problem, but just to vent to you about the situation because they feel that your energy is genuine and they genuinely want to tell you what's wrong. So I think if they do that, I think, as me, I'm going to listen, once again, I might not have a solution, but at least I was able to get that off your chest, so.
Kelly, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think a big piece of that is validating the other person, right? So if they say like, man, my day has sucked, you just say, that sounds rough, right? And sometimes that's all we need. We don't need someone to necessarily solve every problem that we have, but just to get it out there, like, get it off your own chest and get it out there and then have someone validate like, yeah, that does sound hard. And it's similar to what happens in the classroom. So a lot of classrooms started doing like morning circle time, not just like the ABCs 1, 2, 3 things, but like morning check-ins. And so, at the middle school and the high school, that looks a little bit different, but at the elementary school, it might literally be, a circle and everyone is, are you having a good day? Raise your hand. Or are you having a bad day? Raise your hand. Or it might be something on the board where students can just put sticky notes on the board, but really it's just making time for those little moments of connection and follow up when they're needed. One of the things that we started doing is, as a mental health staff, is before our meetings, we share celebrations. So it's not necessarily getting the opportunity to check in with each individual person, but starting with something positive in a way to share something with others.
Other questions? Go ahead, please.
I'm worried that it's off topic, but I've been reading, I teach at Longwood, but I've been reading a lot about the language around what students lost in grade school, secondary school. And so from you guys' perceptions, what are the deficits that everybody's talking about? And are those balanced by some serious skills that students learned not being in the classroom every day? Is there stuff they can do now that's really impressive, either on a history level or on a emotional management level? I don't know what I want to do. Sorry, that was really long.
So Renee started her question by saying it was off topic, but I don't think it's off topic at all.
So deficits versus gains.
Yes. So she says she teaches at Longwood and has been reading about the so-called deficits, what students have lost by, not being able to attend school. But do our panelists think that they've kind of been balanced out by some other skills that they've gained during the pandemic or whatever?
I think definitely for the kids who've been out of the classroom, definitely this year, most kids, they came back for the first time. Being able to sit around other kids and, having to do group work, different things of that nature. Being outside the classroom for a year is a long time. Social skills are definitely low, very, very low. Interacting with one another, and going back to anxiety. We had a few kids who had to go to the counselor because we had a classroom full of 25 kids. That's going from sitting at home by yourself, with you and your brother or sister, to not being in class with 24, 25 kids that you don't know. That's kind of a anxiety thing. So I think social skills were definitely turned down. But some pluses, I think a lot of kids were able to pick up different things. We had a couple kids who were probably struggle in a classroom setting, they actually excel being by themselves. So they learn how to do more independent work by themselves, which is, we saw a lot of kids, they don't like group work. They like doing independent work. So I think social skills were definitely lost. And I think, but doing stuff independently, a couple kids gained that. Like it.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to be able to look at what was missed or what skills students are lacking in right now through any kind of assessment that we give. But it's going to be harder to capture those growth areas because they're going to be so different for every student. And not every student is going to have some of those positive outcomes. But a lot of students are. They maybe got more time with their family. They maybe had to learn how to be more independent, maybe at an age earlier than typically. So they learned cooking skills, they learned home management skills. There were some school divisions across the country that actually sent home, like, can't learn school stuff, but you can learn home stuff. Like, here's your assignments, like go make a garden, go do this in a car, go whatever, age appropriate suggestions of things that students can do. So I think there were a lot of students across the country that have learned skills that maybe they wouldn't have gotten to gain in a traditional school setting.
Yeah, Renee, to your point, I think with the articles and such that you might be seeing, talking about what the kids are losing. Firstly, I think it's an exacerbation of current issues already. So when plenty of school districts and places talk about summer slide, right? Just the idea of knowledge lost over just 2 months in the summer. So the argument of kind of 10-month versus year-round schooling, right? So that, the conversation is already out there. And so COVID has certainly exacerbated that. So I've seen, I'm sure many others have seen kind of these graphics that are on social media talking about, if you're in the pandemic, right? Third grader equals a first grader, fifth grader equals a third grader, ninth grader equals a seventh grader type situation in terms of how much knowledge that they have lost in the time that they have not been in school in that situation, in that context. And so I think a lot of it is an exacerbation already of current issues. And then, so I had the pleasure of being teaching a college freshman class this past fall. And so, these are students for the past 18 months before going into college were remote, so it was difficult. I'm not sure you teach freshmen at some point, but it's just like, I'm not that much older than them in theory. They made me feel like I was 200 years old. And like the social aspect, like Lewis just mentioned, that man, it just wasn't there. Like the social norms and expectations, like I had to be so like direct and blatant and explicit about expectations because it just wasn't there. Here's an example that might or might not be related, but it stood out to me and it's kind of like too. And so we're doing presentations, having the students present on basically their passion project, right? What's important to you, right? What are you passionate about? And so my late student X, comes in late, as they normally do. And so she walks in and this other student's presenting. And so part of the project, you present and you give me your paper as part of the presentation, easy enough, right? And so the student is presenting, and so my late student walks in and then proceeds to walk along the side, past the slideshow, past the student presenting, hands me her paper. Okay, I'm like, go sit down. What are you doing? And then she walks back in front of the student, back in front of the projector, like no dipping, no like reaction at all, just kind of, eyes completely immune to the projector. Like, I was like, is this normal? Like, I just don't understand. And so, for me, it's about I've had to be very deliberate, very explicit, because they just don't have those same established set of norms. And I think they're a different generation in general, so add on top of the technology in general and all of that stuff. But I think a lot of what you see maybe is similar maybe to what I've been saying. And I think a lot of it's just an exacerbation of current issues and current trends in education that people are already talking about.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions.
They can as well.
Can you have a question?
Lewis, I have an aunt that teaches middle school, and she said she's worried about the generation of kids that missed middle school and are now going to high school, and like middle school is such a defining moment in terms of studying those things.
Yes.
That help you as you progress. You kind of see that in your.
So the question is about a person teaching middle school who is concerned about the fact that missing middle school and that big milestone, is a hard thing. So has that been your experience, Louis?
I think you got to go back to even elementary, the fourth graders who missed that whole entire year, and then they're jumping right into middle school. Two different worlds, you know what I'm saying? So, they came over there, thinking it's elementary, and, you had, got to put them, I hate to say it, put them in their place like that, guys. This is fifth grade. I mean, you're in fifth middle school, you guys got to, but yes, fortunately though, Kim, and at the high school, we have great leaders over there that is, I mean, like you said, they're gonna learn the hard way, of course, because like you said, middle school is, to even for me when I was in school, it's where you don't find yourself, but you find, basically the principles of life. I know me personally, like especially eighth grade was definitely defining for me, especially going up to the high school, learning who I am, my principles, my standards. And like you said, most kids miss that. And at the end of the day, as a educator, mentor, a person that's a youth activist, and a lot of other youth activists out there, what can we do? But, as we see them falling, be there for them, and be able to push good advice to them, be able to, help guide them into that right direction. Because it's so many of them, you can't even get them all, but, once we see them, we're able to, help guide them. But the high school staff is definitely going to be ready for them and be able to, the ones that, aren't on that page, they're going to get them on there. Definitely.
Yeah, one of the reactions from schools across the country really has been that focus on social emotional learning, because that's a big piece of what the students missed out on. And so a lot of schools have really kind of tried to tie that into their curriculum in different ways. And then I know Prince Edward and also Buckingham, where I work, are both school divisions that have implemented VTSS, which is Virginia Tiered Systems of Supports. And that's a whole different, session to talk about. But in general, the idea is having these kind of baseline expectations that are consistent across the board and taking the time to really teach those expectations. And so that's been really important to kind of, you can't make up those years that they lost, but making sure that we're taking the time to teach them those skills that they didn't get to learn in those years.
So this conversation just reminds me of a quote that stuck out to me in a Chronicle article I was reading earlier this week, where it just kind of talked about, like, we could spend a lot of time focused on the deficits, but if we shift the conversation to focusing on the strengths and the motivations of a student, we might be better off in terms of helping their advancement.
So Cam was referencing a Chronicle quote about, and I'm going to misquote it. So in summary, about focusing on shifting focus from the deficit
to the strengths.
And I think that's a good place to wrap up. I do have a few little housekeeping things I want to say, and then I am going to ask both of our panelists to kind of share some final thoughts. So before you all leave, after we kind of wrap up the panel, there is more food in the back. Please eat it for our in-person guests. I'm sorry for the virtual people. Also for our in-person guests, we have a giveaway. So we were able, because of the grant, to purchase some things from the Bowden gift shop. So we're going to do a drawing for that as you're enjoying your snacks after the panel. And thank you all for coming.
And do they write their name?
Yes. So if you haven't yet, please write your name on a slip of paper. It's right in front of the books in the back. Put it in the mug, and we'll just do a random drawing. It's the fairest way I could think to do it. So in thinking of education and well-being, do we have any final thoughts from our panelists?
As a teacher and a mentor, the youth is our future. Like I said, no matter how difficult a child may be, how much you have to talk to them throughout the day, you are still like you're as a person who, like I said, if you're a teacher, your goal is not just to teach. I'm sorry, it's not just to teach. All right, I learned that when I first started. It's not just to teach. It's not about the lesson plan. It's not about none of that. It's about connection. It's connection. When you step into class, that first day of school, you need to make that connection. It's not going to be a day. It's not going to be 2 days. It might be a week, 2 weeks. But every day you take steps to make a connection to your kids. And trust me, once it's there, it's there. Kids will do anything you ask. I promise you. And they will not give you any backlip, and they will respect you, and they'll come to you when they have a problem. So, like I say, anybody who's a teacher or youth activist or mentor, don't give up on the kids. These kids need us, and just keep, like I said, just don't give up on them. Don't give up on them.
I think children, youth, they are extremely resilient. And I think that sometimes that gets lost in the conversation, and it becomes so much us as adults thinking about they've lost this, they've missed this, what has happened. There were a couple years of school that maybe weren't the most ideal situation. And so maybe it did change some life paths of some of these children and, middle schoolers and high schools especially. But for the most part, they've recovered. They've found a different path. I can think of some high schoolers that are definitely in a very different place now graduating, or they graduated last year, than where they thought they were going to be as freshmen. Maybe not going to college, going to a different school than they thought they were, but they have learned what they needed to learn, and they've moved on with their life, and are kind of content with where they are. So I think a big thing is focusing on those positives, that growth mindset, and remembering that children are resilient.
Well, I'm just struck by both Kelly and Lewis. Just thank you for the work you do day in and day out with our youth. So thank you so much. They're fortunate to have you both.
Thank you.
Also, one last thing. Again, thank you all so much for coming. You'll also see on the back table, and if you're sitting on some of the tables, there are bookmarks with a QR code and a web link to a survey. Again, this was a grant-funded project. Part of grants is assessment. So if you could please fill out the survey. I think it's only 4 questions. So thank you again for coming. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much. Eat the snacks.